Most of the time, we think we're thinking clearly. We assume we're seeing the situation for what it is. But the human mind doesn't work that way. It filters, it reacts, it jumps to conclusions long before we realize it. And in a world full of noise, opinions, emotions, and information, clear thinking is becoming increasingly rare. But clarity isn't luck, it's a skill. A skill built on understanding how the mind forms beliefs, how bias shapes perception, and how a few simple questions can completely change the way you see a problem. In this video, we're going to break down critical thinking into a practical everyday framework. Not abstract philosophy, not complicated logic. Just a simple structure for recognizing what's real, what's assumed, and what actually deserves your attention. This is critical thinking. Explained a guide to seeing the world more clearly. Let's begin. Most people hear the phrase critical thinking and imagine something complicated. A skill reserved for scientists, philosophers, or people who enjoy long arguments. We think it means doubting everything, overanalyzing, or constantly looking for flaws. But the truth is much simpler and far more practical. Critical thinking is not about thinking harder. It's about thinking clearer. It's the ability to see things as they really are, not as your assumptions, emotions, or biases want them to be. And in a world overflowing with information, opinions, emotions, noise, and distractions, clarity has become a superpower. So today we're going to break critical thinking into something simple and usable. Not theory, not jargon. A real framework you can apply to everyday decisions, whether you're solving a problem at work, deciding who to trust, or trying to understand a situation without jumping to conclusions. To understand critical thinking, we need to start with a question. Why do two people look at the same facts and reach completely different conclusions? It's not because one is smart and the other isn't. It's because the human brain doesn't perceive reality directly. It interprets it. And interpretation is shaped by assumptions, emotions, memories, and shortcuts, many of which operate without us noticing. Critical thinking is the tool that corrects those distortions. But before we explore the framework, we need to clear up a few misconceptions. Critical thinking is not negativity. It's not about tearing things apart or assuming everything is wrong. It is not skepticism for the sake of skepticism. It's simply the practice of seeing things clearly before making a judgment. A simpler definition is this: critical thinking is the ability to separate what you see from what you think about what you see. It's the art of noticing the difference between reality and your interpretation of reality. Once you understand this, the next step is learning the structure of thinking clearly. And for that, we'll use a simple 4-layer framework. Layer 1 is observation. This is where you ask, what is actually happening? Not what you assume is happening. Not what you feel is happening. Not what someone told you is happening. But what you can verify. Observation is about identifying facts, the raw data of reality. It's the difference between saying, he ignored me, and he didn't respond to my message for 3 hours. The first is an interpretation. The second is a verifiable observation. Critical thinkers live in the world of verifiable observations before they move into meaning. Once you've separated facts from stories, you move to layer 2 analysis. Here you ask, why is this happening? What might explain it? What patterns can I see? What evidence supports one explanation over another? This layer is where you look for root causes, not the surface-level conclusions, not the emotionally satisfying explanation, but the one supported by data. One of the most powerful tools here is the why technique. You ask why repeatedly until you reach the root of the issue. It's the difference between treating symptoms and understanding the system behind them. Layer 3 is evaluation. This is where logic enters the picture. Once you've generated possible explanations, you evaluate them. Does this explanation make sense? Is it consistent? Does it hold up when compared to other perspectives? Could the opposite also be true? This is also where we confront one of the biggest threats to clear thinking: cognitive biases. Biases are mental shortcuts. They save time and energy, but they distort reality. And because they operate automatically, they shape our decisions before we even realize it. Confirmation bias makes us notice only evidence that supports our beliefs. Anchoring makes the first information we hear disproportionately influential. The sunk cost fallacy makes us stay committed to something simply because we already invested in it. There are dozens of these biases, and they all trick the brain into believing something for reasons that feel logical, but aren't. Critical thinking requires identifying these biases and asking, am I believing this because it's true, or because it feels comfortable? Is my reasoning based on evidence, or on emotion, which brings us to the fourth layer decision? After observing, analyzing, and evaluating, you choose how to act. Critical thinking doesn't replace action, it guides it. It helps you use the smallest amount of effort for the largest amount of clarity. The best decision isn't always the most complicated one. Often, it's the simplest action, supported by the clearest understanding. Now that we've explored the four-layer framework, let's meet the enemies of critical thinking, the forces that quietly sabotage clarity. The first enemy is cognitive bias. Biases are built into the brain. They help us make quick decisions, but they often lead us to the wrong ones. Because biases don't care about truth, they care about efficiency. The brain wants shortcuts, not accuracy. The second enemy is emotion. Feelings are powerful, and they often override logic before logic even shows up. If you like something, your brain assumes it's good. If you dislike it, your brain assumes it's bad. This emotional shortcut can distort even simple decisions. Critical thinking doesn't eliminate emotion, but it prevents it from driving the car. The third enemy is mental laziness. Clear thinking requires energy. The brain is designed to save energy, so it gravitates toward easy answers, fast conclusions, and simple narratives. We jump to conclusions because it feels efficient. But speed often sacrifices accuracy. Critical thinking begins the moment you slow down the jump, when you pause long enough to let the thinking catch up to the reaction. This brings us to a key principle, the slowdown principle. The brain has two modes of thinking: fast thinking, automatic, emotional, instinctive, and slow thinking, deliberate, analytical, reflective. Both modes are useful. You need fast thinking to survive and make quick decisions. But slow thinking is essential when accuracy matters. Critical thinking is the art of knowing when to switch from fast to slow. A fast reaction might tell you that someone was rude. But slow thinking reveals they were distracted, tired, or dealing with something you didn't know. Fast thinking leads to judgment. Slow thinking leads to understanding. And understanding is the foundation of critical thinking. Now let's move from theory to practice tools you can use to think better every day. The first tool is the question test. Whenever you believe something, ask, how do I know this is true? What is the evidence? What else could explain this? These questions prevent you from accepting the first explanation. Your brain finds the convenient one and push you toward the correct one. The second tool is the opposite view exercise. Pick the perspective opposite to your initial conclusion and try to argue in its favor. This doesn't mean you must adopt the opposite view, just explore it. Doing this forces the brain to consider possibilities it normally ignores. The third tool is the 10 and 10 to 10 rule. Ask how your decision will affect you in 10 minutes, 10 months, and 10 years. This simple time shift breaks emotional tunnel vision and reveals consequences that immediate feelings usually hide. The fourth tool is the 80-20 rule applied to thinking. Not all information matters. Often 20% of the data provides 80% of the insight. Clear thinkers focus on the few pieces of information that actually make a difference. Next, let's talk about thinking traps, the common mental errors people fall into. The first trap is jumping to conclusions. We see a small part of the picture and assume we know the whole thing. Critical thinking asks us to wait before concluding to gather more pieces. The second trap is overgeneralization. One bad experience becomes always. One mistake becomes everything. Critical thinking zooms in instead of zooming out. The third trap is mistaking feelings for facts. I feel this is true becomes this is true. But feelings are not evidence. They are signals, important signals, but they are not proof. The fourth trap is confusing correlation with causation. Two things happening at the same time does not mean one caused the other. This trap is everywhere in news arguments and even personal judgments. Critical thinking protects us from these traps by identifying them before they distort our judgment. Now let's put everything together into a simple routine, a loop you can run in your mind whenever you need clarity. Pause. Observe. Question. Check bias. Consider alternatives. Decide. Reflect. This loop takes 30 to 60 seconds, but it can save you hours of frustration, years of poor decisions, and countless misunderstandings. To see how powerful this loop can be, let's look at a simple case study. Imagine someone at work who feels offended because a colleague didn't greet them in the morning. Their fast thinking says, "They're angry at me. They're rude. They don't like me." But instead of reacting, they slow down and start the loop. Pause. Observe. They walked past me without looking up. Question, why might that happen? Check bias. Am I assuming it's about me? Consider alternatives. Maybe they're stressed. Maybe they're late. Maybe they didn't see me. Decide I won't take it personally. Reflect I avoided unnecessary conflict. Later, they discover the colleague had a rough morning and wasn't thinking about anyone at all. This is what critical thinking does. It reduces unnecessary suffering. It saves relationships. It prevents misunderstandings. It creates clarity. Critical thinking doesn't make life more complicated. It makes life simpler because you understand what's actually happening. In a world where information is endless, where emotions run high, and where fast thinking dominates, critical thinking is not just useful, it is essential. It doesn't promise perfect answers. It promises clearer ones. And clarity is the foundation of good decisions, good relationships, good work, and a good life. Critical thinking isn't a superpower. It's a practice, a repeatable, learnable, strengthenable skill. The more you use it, the sharper it becomes. And the sharper it becomes, the more clearly you begin to see the world and yourself. Critical thinking isn't about being right. It's not about winning arguments or outsmarting someone else. It's about seeing clearly enough to make better decisions, avoid unnecessary conflicts, and understand the world without distortion. When you slow down your reactions, when you separate what's observed from what's assumed, when you question your own certainty, clarity emerges. And with clarity comes better choices in work, in relationships, and in life. The framework we explored isn't a one-time technique. It's a habit. A small discipline that repeated over time reshapes the way you think. If you want more videos that explain how the mind works and how to think better in a noisy world, feel free to stay for the next one. And let me know what topic you'd like explained next. Thanks for watching. Stay curious.